Okay, it looks like a few folks are still filing in, but that slowed down a little bit. So just for the sake of time, we'd love to start. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Robert Voggy and I oversee research and membership at the Tennessee Charter School Center. I'm very excited to moderate today's discussion on a critical issue for many schools, which is chronic absenteeism. This webinar is part of our Success Stories case study series, where we analyze publicly available data to identify schools achieving extraordinary outcomes. Our goal is to uncover the policies and practices that drive these results, ideally offering insights for educators throughout the state. This is the fifth installment in this series, and this webinar is an outgrowth of a written report that can be found on our website and that Emily's going to share in the chat. So this case study showcases two public charter schools, Compass Community School Berclair and Compass Community School Hickory Hill. These schools have made remarkable strides in reducing chronic absenteeism, which is defined as missing 10% or more of a school year. Berclair's rate dropped from 55.5% in 2021-2022 to 7% in the 2023-2024 school year. That's a 48.5 percentage point decline, the largest in Tennessee. Hickory Hill's rate fell dramatically as well, from 35.6 to 6.8 over the same period. Both now rank among the state's lowest for chronic absenteeism, and we're here to explore how they achieved this transformation. Now, we are joined by some exceptional leaders from Compass Community Schools. We have with us Letitia Harp, Director of Student Services and Title IX Coordinator for Compass Community Schools. She oversees student support services, ensuring consistency and compliance in Section 504 policies and procedures for student identification, eligibility, and placement. She collaborates with school administration to develop procedures impacting student behavior, discipline, attendance, and school safety to achieve district and network goals. We also have Kami Cowan, and she's the principal at Compass Berclair, a TVOS Level 5 school for 3 consecutive years. Committed to building a safe, supportive, and joyful school culture, Kami holds a master's degree in urban education from Union University and brings expertise in instructional leadership focused on academic outcomes and strong school culture systems. We also have with us Brooke Kalberg, graduated from Australian Catholic University and has served students in Melbourne, Australia, and Memphis, Tennessee for 16 years. She's been principal of Compass Hickory Hill for 2 years. Compass Hickory Hill was a TVOS Level 5 and TN Ready Reward School for the 24-25 school year. She works to create a warm and inclusive school culture and to support educators in elevating academic rigor and student engagement and implementing equitable classroom practices. So thank you all for joining us. So let's get started with the webinar portion of this, or the question portion. So the first question is that you've made dramatic reductions of chronic absenteeism at Berclair and Hickory Hill, and that was part of a broader network-wide initiative involving both the Hyde Family Foundation and Attendance Works. Can you share what prompted Compass Community Schools to tackle chronic absenteeism and what roles these partners played in the process?
So we were prompted to tackle chronic absenteeism based upon just a high chronic absenteeism rate. So of course, coming back from COVID 2021-22, the chronic absenteeism rate overall for all Compass network schools was like 49%. And we reduced it 22-23 school year, which was 33%. And so we knew that we still needed to do something else to bring that number down some more. And so we just wanted to align on like common goals as a network for all of our campuses. And so that partnership with the Hyde Foundation and Attendance Work helped us to create like some common language, put some structures and supports in place as far as what were those tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 practices that we wanted to implement across the board for all of our campuses. And so we do have 6 campuses, 5 K-8 schools, and then 1 high school. And so with those partnerships, that just allow us to collaborate not only within the network, but with some outside charters as well.
That's great. And I know that as part of the process with Attendance Works, and by the way, most of what we'll hear about today are how you all partnered with Attendance Works and implemented their great program. Tell us a little bit about that relationship and how you partnered. I know that you were part of communities of practice as well as using their sort of just general free resources, but in a coaching context.
Absolutely. And so with the Communities and Partners partnership, it was Compass along with several other local charter schools that partnered with Attendance Works. And so that meant um, twice a school year, we met together collaboratively, all of us, all of the charters, just to talk about best practices, what was working, what wasn't working. And then Attendance Works, someone from their team met individually with the principals. I think it was like once a quarter, just to talk about attendance numbers, what were some strategies they were putting in place. They provided resources and supports as far as how to implement those tier two, tier three strategies across the school system. And so that was really beneficial because we got to see like some of the other best practices that were being implemented across other charters as well. And so we pulled what worked for us, and then we saw some things that wasn't working. And so we kind of revamped some of our structures as a result of that partnership.
And I love that you're already jumping into the nuts and bolts with tier one, tier two, and tier three. So maybe just for folks who aren't familiar with that framework, could you share a little bit more?
Yes, so those tier one students were the students who probably fell within that 0 to 5%. I'll say I'll go up to 0 to 8% um, category of absences. So for us, we classified our tier one for those students who had 0 to probably 5 absences. The tier two, five, up to about maybe 8 to 10. And then tier three was beyond 10 days. And so we just kind of like looked at that, structured out to say, okay, what could we do for all of our families to address absenteeism? But then for those tier two, tier three, what extra supports did we need to put in place to address and provide those wraparound services for those families?
I love that. And that's central to the next thing that I hope we can talk about, which is, a key component of the program that you all implemented were attendance teams, right? And maybe we could hear from the principals on this one, but can you explain what attendance teams are, how they function, and how they identify effective solutions to reduce chronic absenteeism?
Sure. Our attendance team, I would say, is the glue that held a lot of why our rate dropped so drastically. And it consisted of our counselor, our secretary, dean of academics, and myself. We had a set time every other Friday where we would come together with a pre-work agenda already filled out with all the data in it of who's falling in that tier two or almost in that tier two category, who is tier three. And we kind of just kept that running agenda going all throughout the year. Even when I was looking at it yesterday, it was really great to see how scholars would eventually not be on the list anymore as the year continued. And we really had focuses every month. So we would come together, talk about those students, look at the data, and kind of all get on the same page about who needs to be the scholars that we're really focusing on this month. Is there any area of our attendance that we're seeing that we need to adjust? And for ours, we really wanted to focus on tardies this year. And so we started to think through all of those scholars that were falling into those tiers. And then how could we be proactive for some of this? Because attendance works is all about that tier one structure of having a proactive plan to prevent before it even begins. And so really making sure we had some proactive plans and celebrations in place to make sure that we're preventing things before they happen. But if they are happening, what's going to be our game plan? So it was really purposeful and really intentional. And shout out to my counselor. She was really great at looking at that data, getting that data in that chart every other week when we meet together. And I think it really helped our team stay really laser focused on the scholars that needed support.
And Brooke, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how your school implemented the attendance team as well. But also, I want to point out that this was part of sort of the standard approach to attendance works program that you implemented, right? Is um, every school had to implement an attendance team, but then from there you sort of played to find your school's needs, your community's needs, and then the attendance team would be sort of the hub for how to do that. Maybe you could explain a little bit about that, Brooke.
Yes, so our attendance team looked slightly different to Berclair's. So some of our members of the team have different roles. So in our attendance team, we did have our counselor. We also had our dean of students, and we had one of our special education teachers and myself. In our team, we met weekly to look at the attendance data each week and to really drill down in that data. So a similarity between Berclair and Hickory Hill and how we looked at our data was we drilled down to find individual students who were becoming at risk to fall from tier 1 to tier 2 or becoming at risk to fall from tier 2 to tier 3, and then look at reasons and underlying causes for that to then respond. We already had a lot of structures in place around school rewards and culture that we continued with, and our attendance team really focused on that data and then responding to that data according to individual needs of students and families.
I think something that really struck me as we were talking about this throughout the project was what's possible when you devote school-wide resources to solving a problem. And when there's a team, especially if it includes key leadership, you can really make a difference. And I thought what was really interesting about the attendance teams was that they fit almost similarly into an MTSS framework, which a lot of folks have infrastructures in place to sort of review that kind of data. And I don't think it was too big of a stretch then to say, well, how do we apply this to chronic absence? So yeah, it was great to hear about that. And I think something that a lot of schools can implement pretty easily. Now, we talked about attendance teams, and Brooke, you just mentioned a little bit of what else is going on. But the attendance teams, as I sort of understood it when we spoke, was that they're sort of the hub. They're one of the central features, but then we need to be building out from there and creating sort of broader systems to get students into school. And some of it is focused directly on attendance. But other parts of it are sort of indirect, like you said, creating a supportive schools culture, a place where kids want to show up. I was hoping that each of you could speak a little bit to the attendance focused activities that you did or changes that you put in place to help support what the attendance team was doing or to learn from the attendance team. And then also some of those bigger school culture pieces. What are you doing to make sure that kids want to come to school?
I can definitely speak to the pieces around what we do as foundational and tier 1 supports for students, just to ensure that they want to come to school so that we're preventing any of those school refusal type problems that can lead to attendance issues. So at the beginning of the school year, each teacher in their classroom has a huge focus on building a classroom culture and getting to know their students and providing their students with opportunities to get to know each other via really intentional and planned activities. Teachers also spend a lot of time planning and implementing classroom procedures and routines to support students in knowing what's expected of them each day and then feeling that sense of belonging to a classroom community as well. And so our students want to come to school to be a part of their class community each day. We also have supportive upon arrival. That's something that we focus on across campus, where in the mornings, our teachers are at their doors, ready to greet students when they arrive at school. Teachers are very intentional about greeting students by name and responding to anything that students might be coming in with that's different, whether that's good and they might notice a new haircut, new glasses, things like that, or a student that's not feeling so great that day as well. So just making sure that we have that support piece right away. Also, every morning across campus, students participate in a morning meeting with their class and that's led by their teacher. And so that gives that community building opportunity every day. So those pieces really support students just wanting to come to school. Our teachers play a huge part in our success with attendance because of the work that they do in their classrooms and all of the planning that goes into those things that they do in their classrooms and building their classroom cultures.
I can share a little bit about the important pieces that each person on our team really does, because our team was really trying to figure out what are the things that also bring us joy and what are the things that we're already doing within our day that attendance can kind of latch on to. Because I think sometimes this chronic absentee rate becomes very overwhelming. It seems very daunting. You almost don't even know where to start. And so I think the biggest thing is like picking a plan, figuring out what brings staff and attendance team joy, and lean into it. So our plan, I would say, as Compass in general and specifically at Berclair, is nothing that's super flashy. It's just consistent. And so I think like that is the biggest thing about the attendance team and the plan and what you do is just being consistent with it. So my counselor does focus lunch groups. She already has lunch duty. So she said, oh, great, I'm going to do one day a week. I'm going to pick our scholars that are on the brink of tier 2, and we're all going to meet together. And that really helped those scholars build deeper relationships with people in their class. And they noticed when each other was gone, and they were talking about it in the focus lunch group because she already had lunch duty. The secretary already makes daily attendance calls every single, no matter if we know where you are, if you have the flu and you're going to be out 3 days, Mrs. Rivera is going to call you. And it's not from even a compliance angle. It's how are you doing? Let me check in with you. I noticed Johnny is still not here today. How is he feeling today? That has been really purposeful. And I think it's created a lot of trust around when scholars aren't at school, they're more apt to tell us where they are because they know we care about them. And the last one is a huge one because I really love celebrating small and large things with our school culture. And so really thinking of ways in building, out of building, connecting with community partners to celebrate and use the language around like 95% and above, because we want to encourage them to have self-care of when they are absent, that they take care of themselves, but also rewarding consistency of them showing up, being there every day. And it's allowed all of us to just really lean into giftings of what brings us joy, but also support attendance and make it better. So I think like that's a thing I always think about, even when I'm thinking about for next year, is just we tried some things in Q4 because I wanted to see what kind of stuck. And we're really excited about some new things we're going to do, but we're not abandoning all of those things that I just mentioned before, just continuing to be consistent to the things that bring us joy, but also work for our school.
Now, Kami, that the last thing you mentioned, I think really hits on something that you both had to do, which is have a big education push around what chronic absence is, what it's not, and why it matters. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. How was it educating your staff and your community?
There was a big, when we started doing this, I'm laughing because even getting the vocabulary around like what is chronic, what is excused, what is unexcused. Well, I turned in a note. Why didn't the absence go away? All of those things I think was a really big piece in the beginning, is just getting like a shared language of what even does all this mean? And then also bringing that down with language barriers. 94% of my scholars are Latinx. And so I had to be really specific and really concise about what exactly all of these things mean, because also for families, it can be very overwhelming. So that was the first piece, is getting that vocabulary going. And the other big one, which I'm sure Brooke is probably going to address, is those long extended breaks and letting them see like the impact of what that does to them at school every day and how that impacts them over the long term. Those were big ones, is around using the breaks to take the breaks and getting that shared language.
I agree with a lot of what Kami said, that just learning that even if you have a note, it doesn't mean that you weren't absent. That's even a big learning curve for families. Also for teachers, there was a learning curve for all of us as educators around what's the difference between truancy and chronic absenteeism. And so that's been a really great learning and professional development experience for all of us on the team. In our schools at Campus Hickory Hill and at Campus Berclair, we have a lot of families who travel over winter break or summer break to visit family in other countries. And so for families who take extended breaks and have been used to doing that, the push on attendance has been tricky and has required planning, and it's also required communication from us at the school around understanding that we all love to go and visit our families, and when students miss school, they miss a particular number of hours and days of instruction, and also of building that community and doing that social emotional development with their peers too. And so there's been a lot of efforts around communication via family orientation, via regular written communication with families in English and Spanish around their expectations for attendance, like that 95% plus that Kami mentioned, and also early communication around quarterly dates for schools, I think is really important. And that's something that schools can do pretty easily, is get their quarterly dates out to families early so that when families are making travel plans, they know when their child is expected to be in school.
Yeah, I love all of that. I think it really stood out to me. I study education for a living, and of course, to me, I think, well, if a student's not in school, they're not learning. But I think that was really compelling to me, that that's something I might take for granted, that you had to go and explain to everybody throughout the whole system that missing school results in lost learning. And what I loved, maybe to bring it back to the attendance teams a little bit, is, it is someone's role on the attendance team to check up with every student who is not there for the day. And one thing that was really compelling to me was hearing the folks on your staff who do that tell me about how it was their job to educate parents, to say, oh, your child's at the doctor, they have a fever? No? Well, then bring them back when they're done. And I think, especially with some of the communities that your schools serve, choosing who the right person is to do that can be really important. And so I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about how to choose the right people to take part in each of these steps.
I'll start off by saying counselors were automatically added to each of the attendance teams, because the counselors, a lot of times, they focus on the SEL piece. So if a family is needing some additional wraparound services, they could be a part of that team. And a lot of times the families felt comfortable with them, they could talk to them, and they would provide that they'll disclose those needs to the counselor first. So we made it to where all counselors were a part of the attendance team, and the principals selected the rest of the members of the teams.
So principals who, like, if I'm a principal and I'm in a school and I want to start putting together this sort of attendance team, like what should I look for and who to choose for each role? Because I think you chose some really special people, just having interviewed them all.
So I think it was a big focus for us to have people on our attendance teams who speak our families' languages, so the languages of our school communities. That's a huge priority so that communication can be clear and it includes all families. So at both of our schools, we have team members on our attendance teams who speak Spanish. It was also a huge priority to choose members of the team who represent all of our groups within our schools. So, like Letitia said, we have our counselors because they work with all of our students and families, and especially students and families who may have particular social and emotional needs. We also had at my school, we had one of our special education teachers. In order to make sure that our students who receive special education services are represented and their family needs are catered to as well and made aware of. And additionally, the members of the teams needed to be members of our wider school team who are able to practice with empathy and also via a problem-solving lens too. So they're able to listen to students and families if they're having concerns or any barriers to attendance. And then they're also able to look at those and work on those barriers with a problem-solving focus.
Kami, do you want to share a bit about your team?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has mentioned. I think the thing you want to think about is who are going to be the people that this is something that leans into their giftings, people that have strength around like strategy, strengths around like big vision picture, and who are just going to be the people that are with scholars in different realms so that they see them in different ways throughout the school day. Because I do think that this team is really important because it has to have a like-minded vision behind it, and also a trust that you're all there for the reason of just making sure that you're creating a safe, supportive, and joyful space for scholars, that the people within that room really have that common vision and common goal. So just whoever you're putting on that team, it's really important at the beginning to make sure that those goals are really clear and ones that you really believe in, because you spend a lot of time together and it's impactful with a lot of people across the building.
Yeah, and I will say, thinking about people's giftings and where they would fit best, what really stood out, especially at Berclair, was the person making all the contacts with the families. We started our interview, and she was so genuine to say, "I love these children." And there were interactions with students on the call that we had that really affirmed that. And so I think that really stood out, that putting the right people in the right place to help families feel like they can trust the school with their students and with the information that maybe being gone is not helpful for their students is a really important piece. And you both have done that so well. Now, you both have touched on um, some of the things you've learned, right? And sometimes when we look at school transformations over time, it'll be a 5-year journey or a 10-year journey, but you guys have achieved this in like 2 years, which means you've learned a lot very quickly, right? And I think that's part of the purpose of the attendance teams. So tell us a little bit about the challenges you face, some of the things that maybe you went into these conversations having as assumptions that were proved wrong, and what you had to do to pivot, but some of the challenges and transformations that you've seen and experienced along the way.
I think the biggest challenge that we faced this past school year was students and or families feeling safe to bring their students to school when the reports that the ICE raids were going to be taking place. That was a big challenge, just trying to reaffirm the families to say, hey, we're here to support you. This is a safe space. And I think the initial day, the attendance was like, it was very, very low. But after we spoke with the parents, made that communication, told them that it was, safe, then the parents felt safe enough to bring those students back to school, and the attendance rate kind of like leveled out and remained high for the remainder of the school year.
Yeah, I would say mine goes along with what Letitia was saying. That day was probably one of my hardest days in education I've ever had. Like, I just saw our chronic rate double overnight and I wanted to panic. Like, oh my gosh, this doubled literally overnight. People are feeling unsafe. And I had to like really regulate myself back down and realize that attendance data is like ebbing and flowing all the time. I mean, riding the wave of that sometimes is you just have to remember the end game of what your goals are, what you're trying to do, and really reaffirming and reminding yourself that really having a safe, supportive, and joyful school culture, if you continue to do that and be consistent to that, those things will be okay. But there are days sometimes where the attendance does fluctuate and you pause for a second. And you have to remind yourself, just like teachers do with test data, that that one day or that one quarter is not going to define us, because it's just the picture is bigger beyond that. So I think that is just a big one for me. And even just looking at our data from this school year, it's super encouraging and I'm really proud of that work. And I'm thinking about like, what are the things that stuck? What are the things that we want to continue to improve on? But riding the wave of attendance data and recognizing it will feel very like you're being submerged for a minute, but really leaning into that attendance team and reminding yourself of the bigger picture of it, because it can become overwhelming some days.
I agree with Letitia and Kami that that point in the school year was really hard attendance wise, and also as a school providing support for families and making sure that families felt safe. It was a huge challenge. I'll also speak to developing your systems around examining attendance data and having your team meet and communicating with families on a daily basis for absences. Developing systems for all of those things can be a challenge for schools, but it's really important to get systems in place so that it's efficient and so that you can do the work, because it's so important and it does really pay off. Kami kind of spoke to that too, around like, if you stay the course with what you're doing, it really pays off because kids are at school and that's what's most important. So getting those systems in place is challenging, and also maintaining persistence with some families who need those repeated opportunities for communication around the importance of attendance and around that every hour of school counts and every day of school counts. That can also be challenging for members of the attendance team to have that persistence, but again, it's worth it, because as we know as educators, sometimes students don't get concepts first time, and it's the same with families. We need to persist and keep up with the communication around the importance of being at school every day.
I love that. And I think one thing that stood out to me as we spoke, and Brooke, you mentioned this, was, through the process, you learned that traveling to countries of origin was one of the causes of students not being at school, right? I'd be curious, did you all start this knowing that that was the issue, or did you maybe have other thoughts or theories about what might be causing it? And how did that change? And what was the process of learning that like?
I would say we knew that that was going to be one of the big ones. And I think what has helped and started to lessen those, I would say every year they cut in half. So as we've continued to stay consistent, those longer breaks have been less and less of them have been happening, which has been great. I think going back to really making sure that you have proactive language around when our breaks, like as soon as the calendar is released, I am posting on Dojo. I'm sending home notes. Here's our breaks for next year. Just a reminder, these are the times that would be great to travel. October, we got fall break. November, we have Christmas break, or sorry, Thanksgiving break. We're going to winter break. So as soon as that calendar is released, my dates are going out. And then following up with families, my flyers of the ones that take those breaks, I called them like a week later. Hey, did she give you that note? I want to make sure you have the days. Did you have any questions about those? Just really making sure you're knowing those families, because obviously family is very important. To me, I don't know what it's like to have family living 12, 14 hours away from me. My family does live away from me, but not to that length. And so really coming at it from a lens of empathy, but also sharing why it's important for them to be here. So that proactive approach has been really, really helpful for those families. But having high retention of scholars who come every year and they're not leaving, they're not transient, and they're staying has been very, very helpful because we know our families. We know siblings, we know who are the ones that are going to go on those trips. So that retention has been very helpful because we can be proactive on some of those conversations to make sure they have the information so that hopefully alongside our support, we can continue to have them at school daily.
Brooke, do you want to share a little bit about the process of uncovering just sort of the different nuances of your community?
I would agree with a lot of what Kami said. Both of us were team members at our schools before we were principals, and so we had a really good idea of what the culture of our school was, around a lot of the situations of our families and those types of things. So coming into the role and then coming into our partnership with Attendance Works, we had a great idea of who the families are who travel, and that traveling around summer break and around Christmas break are things that families do. I agree with Kami that we send out calendar dates as early as we can to families so that before they go out for summer, they know when the quarterly breaks are. And then around those, they're able to make travel plans and to best ensure that they'll be back in time for school to start at the beginning of each quarter. Our families also at Campus Hickory Hill is similar to Campus Berclair, where a lot of our students stay from kindergarten through 8th grade. So families get to know expectations of school very well. And families come and ask a lot of questions. If they're planning to travel, they will come and ask questions of me or another member of our attendance team around when they can travel, when their children will be out of school and things like that. So those partnerships that we've developed with families have been really important too. And as families come and ask questions about quarterly dates and when they may be able to plan to travel and those types of things, that tells me that like the communication that we've been doing over time has been effective, and it's really got families thinking about being intentional about having their child at school every day.
I love that. And I think what stands out is that you're listening to the families to hear. Having worked with a few schools and networks, even throughout my career, trying to understand attendance, a, a lot of times folks will come in with sort of opinions or thoughts, but it's actually talking to the families that gives them the clarity that they need. So I love that that's just built into the attendance team process. Now, the last question is around sort of the broader impact to your schools. So attendance is really important. We know from research it's very important, but it's a step along the way. It's almost like a prerequisite to the things we're actually trying to help students with, which ideally is learning, among other things. And so I was hoping that maybe in the last few minutes for our question time, tell us a little bit about the impacts that you've seen on your students and families, both academically and in terms of school culture, as a result of the changes in attendance.
I can speak on this. So, when students are at school every day, like you said, Rob, not only are academics and learning positively impacted, but also students' sense of belonging to their class group. That's really strengthened by being at school every day. So when students are at school every day, they're not missing out on those shared learning experiences and other shared experiences that they have at school. When something funny happens, everyone's there because everyone's at school every day. When they do a fun activity, everyone's there. No one misses out. It helps students to strengthen friendships that they have with classmates. And it helps them in that social emotional development piece. And families tend to feel more connected to school as well. Being there every day and seeing how their child is valued and their child's presence at the school is valued. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling and like self-sustaining kind of cycle where families and students get to see how much their presence is valued and then they want to attend.
That's wonderful. And I know both, oh, Kami, I'll let you speak, but I know that both of your schools are TVOS 5 schools and have been historically. So, Kami, I'm sorry I jumped in there.
No, you're great. That's what I was about to say. So I think the outcome so much of both of our school cultures is really has been showing up and continues to show up with our academic data. Brooke School has been a reward school for multiple years as well. So I knew she probably wouldn't shout herself out for that. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that as well. I think that having a safe, supportive, and joyful school culture where scholars want to come to every day means that they're getting every minute is counting and they are learning not only just about themselves as people, but also academically. And I am really excited to get our state test data back just because our data this year has continued to improve every year, just like our attendance data. I just emailed our data specialist for our network yesterday because I was like, what was our chronic rate for this past school year? And we had one student chronic at our school this past school year. So I was like, are you serious when you emailed that to me? But I think that that school culture and really making it safe, supportive, and joyful for scholars, for families, for staff, like it's starting to really shine. So yeah, I think it's that like language and vocabulary around like staying under 18. Like all my scholars can tell you that. Like we can't get above 18, Miss Cowan. Miss Cowan, I'm at 16. Like they know the number they're at. Like we are very data around them really making sure that they know where they are. And that probably starts around like third grade. I would say we really start to have those conversations. But yeah, I'm really proud of what our network continues to do around academics we have a lot of TVOS 5 schools within our network from this past school year. So I just think we're really moving in the right direction and like continue to continue to be consistent to the plan is what I would just, whatever your plan is, be consistent to it, because it will start to, it will grow. It will.
That's wonderful. And Brooke, do you want to share anything about the positive impacts at your school?
Well, I already spoke on the positive impact on social emotional development, and community and students feeling a part of the school community. And of course, there is that academic piece and that learning piece as well. So when students are present every day, they're able to have those valuable learning experiences that if they're not at school, they're not getting those. That's been a big part of our success over the last few years as well, is that students are simply at school and they're having those learning experiences. We have a high proportion of our students who are English learners. When they're at school, they're having those opportunities to practice conversational English and academic English as well. When students receive RTI services, SPED services, ESL services, when they're at school, they're able to receive those services that they need on a daily basis. And so it supports all of our students, those on grade level, those who require additional services, and it supports their academic growth.
I love that. Well, with the few minutes we have left, I was hoping that we could open it up to questions from folks in the virtual audience here. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat. Well, while we wait for other folks, I have a question for you. Also, Kami, like one student in your school rounds down to a chronic absence rate of 0%. That's a lot. I just want to point that out. But then the actual question, um, you've clearly done a lot, right? You both have sort of driven your chronic absence rates down to about as low as they can go. Kami, like literally as low as it can go. So what comes next? What do you do next? What do you tackle now that you've tackled this issue?
So I think we're going to start getting some more shared language about some of the stuff we're doing. So we do like quarterly celebrations. And so we're moving that language to be called below 17 next year. So that way, like they just know my goal is to stay under, really it's 18, but we're going to say 17. So really just changing some of our language to the stuff that we're already doing to kind of encompass it under one thing. So it just becomes something that we continue to talk about and have really clear language around what we're doing. So yeah, we're going to keep on keeping on. I think the resources, something I want to highlight with Attendance Works, on their website, they have a resources tab and it's all free. So a lot of this stuff, if you're trying to figure out like who is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, there's a drill down worksheet in there. There's messaging already made for you in there that you can send out for breaks. So I sound like I'm doing like an infomercial, but if you need those resources, they are free on there. So go to Attendance Works and use them. So yeah, I don't know how much we're changing. We're just going to continue to go deep in what we're already doing and staying consistent to what we're doing. And yeah, ride in the daily wave of data, I guess, as we were before. But yeah, it's exciting. My staff doesn't know that yet. So I'm really excited to share that with them because at the end of the day, their classrooms and their culture that they're setting within those four walls is also why we can do what we do as a team. So yeah, I'm really excited to share it with everyone, but it's amazing. It's funny, we literally had so many at 17. It was that one day. And so about a month left of school, really sharing that, like, hey, you're at 16 days. Like, I need you here every day. We need you here every day. I want to see you every day. So yeah, just continuing the stuff we were doing.
Rob, I think you're muted. We can't hear you.
I am muted. Thank you for pointing that out, Letitia. So, Kami, you shared with us your chronic absence rate for the coming year. But we have a question: uh, are these trends continuing? Are they happening for you, Brooke? Are they happening throughout the network, Letitia? How are we seeing this trend move?
I know at Hickory Hill, we continued to trend down. So our chronic absent rate was 5% for this year for 24-25. So we beat our goal of 6.5%. We achieved 5% chronic absent. So we're really excited to see that all of the systems that we've put in place and all of the work that we've done is working. And then for 25-26, we plan to put a few new things in place. Early communication around what constitutes an illness to stay out of school for and what constitutes when you can still come to school. That's going to be really important for us, as is doing more data sharing with staff members. So weekly sharing of attendance data with teachers so that they can also keep up with how we're doing. And it's really affirming for them in the work that they do when they see that excellent data.
And yes, the trend is happening across all of our campuses. We do have another campus who made significant reductions as well, and that's our Binghamton campus. They went from 17% to this school year, they ended with 7%. So yes, all of our campus did reduce some, maybe not as significant as the others, but the reduction is taking place. And so we're looking to continue to work with those other campuses who still can make some reductions, but like Kami said, being consistent across the board. We're not changing the plan. We're just going to make it work and be consistent and try to tweak where we can. But for the most part, the consistency is key.
That's wonderful. Now we're actually getting quite a few questions. So if we'll try to answer all of them. If we have to stay a little long on our end, we'll stay a few minutes after. But if folks need to leave ahead of time, that's okay. We're recording this, so it'll be available on our YouTube channel. But we have a question for Brooke. And Brooke, you mentioned having a special education teacher on the attendance team. And one of our participants is wondering, were there any other strategies or supports across campus that were specific to supporting students with disabilities? And I guess we can answer that, Brooke, but Letitia, you may also have some insight into
that. I can speak for our campus, the Hickory Hill campus. So it was important for us to have one of our special education teachers on the team, because he's very well informed around what's happening with our students and families who receive special education services. So what's happening for those students and their families, and being able to advocate for them. He has that kind of prior insight into students' needs and then in turn families' needs that were beneficial for the attendance team to know about. So that's kind of how we did that at our campus.
And across the network, just making sure we're having those timely meetings. So if we need to have a student support team meeting with any of our students who receive special support services, then we try to have those meetings in timely manner. So if we see that grades are impacted due to attendance, we'll call that meeting. and inform the parent of that to let them know that, hey, they're missing out on their support services if they're not at school. But then also trying to see what are the needs of the family. Why is the student missing school? And if we can provide those wraparound services, if they're needing outside support services, connecting them with those outside agencies to get those services provided.
And Kami, it looks like you might be working in the Q&A section there, but I'll raise that question here. So someone had asked, and it just popped out of the Q&A section, but someone had asked about schools who might be trying to implement similar things, but it's not quite working. What misconceptions might they have, or would you think would be common that they can sort of adjust their framing or their thinking through to help ensure that these strategies are successful in their schools?
So I linked a really powerful tool that I would encourage everyone to go through no matter where they're at on this journey. It's a self-assessment. So it goes through, it has like a district one, a school one. So whichever one you feel like would be helpful. There's a self one, all of it. I think this would be really helpful if you're trying to narrow down and be more specific about what mark, I guess, you feel like you're missing or where you want to focus on. So in the first year, we had a lot of places in this self-assessment that we wanted to work on. And then in year 2 of our attendance works, this assessment really helped us like continue to laser focus in on where needs to be our area of focus. So I would say for a school, no matter where they're at on the journey of this self-assessment would be really powerful for a school leader, an attendance team to do, because I think it could bring to light where your misconception could be, and hopefully it does. For ours, our big one was around teacher having a voice in this, because the attendance team, very much handholds a lot of it. But through this self-assessment, we realized in year 2, how are we going to get teachers more within this work, making sure that they have the language, that they know the data, that they see how it's impacting. So I don't know who you are, but I would say the self-assessment might be helpful. So maybe start there and see what happens from there.
Yeah, and just to make a plug again, almost all of what you all have done has been based on your partnership with Attendance Works, who have a ton of free resources. They also have paid options, which are obviously sort of what y'all tapped into, but the free resources are really striking, and there are many of them. So again, for anybody who would be interested in those, you can go to attendanceworks.org. But to get to our last question, I don't know if this is something that played out in Compass, but I do know from having spoken with some of our friends at Attendance Works, there is a question here about chronic absenteeism. Are there differences between elementary and middle school grades, maybe even high school? How do the different grade levels and ages play into your approach and even the reasons that students might not be attending school?
I would say for one of the things that I've noticed is that high school for us, the chronically absenteeism rate has been higher. So that's still a challenge for us, and we're going to dive in and put some more things in place for high school. But with the high school, it's not just the parent that we're focusing on. We have to make sure that the student is motivated. And so even looking at what are those things we can put in place to incentivize the high school students, what's going to be of interest to them, it's just going to be kind of beneficial to reducing that rate. But for us, yes, high school, we have seen that rate is higher.
I can speak to what we do differently. So at my school, the middle schoolers actually attend our attendance meetings, where we make our attendance contracts. They don't attend all of it, but we do have them come in for a part of it, just because, one, we want them to be aware about what's happening, but in hopes that as they transition to high school, they start to also get that language around like what is chronic, what is excused, unexcused, all those things. My incentives, it depends. Most of mine were separated between elementary and middle. but my actual highest chronic rate all throughout the year was kindergarten and first grade. So that was my little group of people that I focused on a lot within the attendance team. But yeah, my middle school grades fluctuated, but my hardest and highest chronic rate throughout the year was the lowest grades, actually.
It's interesting. Well, I want to be sensitive to time. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to email them to me at robert@tnchartercenter.org, and I'll send them to our panelists and see if we can get you some answers. But I just want to thank our panelists. Thank you for the folks who showed up as our participants. It's been wonderful to have you and to hear. For anybody who would like to share this or hear more, we'll share it on our YouTube channel. So we've been recording this webinar. Also, we have the full case study available on our website, which again is tnchartercenter.org. You go to about and then to research, and you can see it there. So thank you all so much. Have a great day.